Jack had spent the last 7 years in places most people only read about in newspapers or see on the news. The familiar sounds of home felt distant as he stepped out of his old pickup truck. The sky above was a dull gray, matching the heaviness that sat on his chest. After 4 deployments and too many close calls, Jack had thought he was done. He had hoped that once his service ended, he could return to a peaceful life. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to find. His heart still echoed the name Max. Max had been his partner in the field, his shadow, his lifeline. During the thick of combat, when everything seemed to fall apart, Max was always there. Together, they'd been a team, a bond no one could break. The report had told Jack that Max was killed in action, lost during a mission in the mountains of Afghanistan. Jack had buried that pain in the deep recesses of his mind, convincing himself it was a part of the job. But as much as he tried to forget, the memories of Max's fierce amber eyes and the sound of his bark haunted him. When Jack turned off the main road, he found himself on a small service road. The tires of his truck crunched against the gravel as he tried to avoid the usual traffic. He wasn't looking for anything special, just some space to breathe and think. But as he passed an old, run-down junkyard, something made him slow down. The wind had started to pick up, and that's when he heard it, a faint bark. At first, Jack thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But then it came again. A soft, weak bark, one that didn't sound like any ordinary dog's bark. It was a sound of pain, of suffering. Jack hit the brakes without thinking. His hand gripped the steering wheel tightly as he stared ahead. His mind raced with questions. Who would leave a dog like that? What was going on behind that fence? He had to find out. Stepping out of the truck, Jack could feel the cold wind cut through his jacket, sending a shiver down his spine. His boots crunched against the gravel as he walked toward the junkyard, his heart beating faster with every step. The sound of twisted metal and broken pallets filled the air. As Jack got closer, he saw the fence, rusted and tangled in weeds. His steps faltered for a moment, but his curiosity pushed him forward. The closer he got, the more he heard it, the low whine of a dog in distress. Jack's eyes scanned the area, looking for the source of the noise. That's when he saw it, a German shepherd, its fur matted and tangled, ribs clearly visible beneath the dirt and grime. The dog was chained to a post, its legs trembling, eyes wide with fear. Jack's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just any dog. The moment their eyes locked, Jack felt his heart stop. There was a recognition in those eyes, a connection that ran deeper than any words could express. Jack took a hesitant step closer, his voice barely above a whisper as he called out, "Max." The dog froze, its muscles tensed, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, painfully, the German shepherd lifted its head. It was a labored motion, the chain rattling as the dog shifted its weight. Jack's pulse quickened. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The dog took a few slow steps toward him, its paw dragging in the dirt. Every move seemed like it took everything the animal had left. But still, it came closer. The dog's bark broke the silence again, this time more urgent. It wasn't a bark of joy, but one of pain and recognition. Jack's knees went weak. That bark, it wasn't just any bark. It was the same sound Max had made in the field. It was the alert sound, the signal they had trained together to use when they were in combat. The sound Jack had come to rely on when danger was near. It was unmistakable. "It can't be," Jack whispered to himself, reaching through the fence, his hand trembling as he reached for Max. The dog took another step forward, its eyes still fierce, even in its weakened state. Jack's fingers brushed against Max's fur, the touch sending a rush of emotions through him. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes as he whispered again, "Max." The dog didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into Jack's hand, pressing its head against his fingers. Jack could feel the years of pain, of abandonment, and of survival in that one simple touch. Max had been through hell, but he was still here, still alive. Jack couldn't believe it. In that moment, the weight of the years seemed to disappear. The pain of the past, the loneliness he had felt without Max by his side, all of it melted away. Jack knew, right then and there, that the mission wasn't over. Max had survived, and Jack was going to do whatever it took to bring him home. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a reunion, and it was just the beginning. As Jack stepped back, his mind was already racing. He pulled out his phone, preparing to do whatever it took to get Max out of there. The dog's eyes followed him, unwavering, as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." Jack knew this was just the start of something much bigger than either of them had ever imagined. And as he turned away from the junkyard, the sound of Max's faint barking still echoing in his ears, Jack made a promise. He would not let Max go through this alone any longer. Together, they would fight to uncover the truth. Jack drove steadily, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Max lay quietly in the passenger seat, his head resting on the seat as though he too was contemplating the journey ahead. The road ahead was unfamiliar, but Jack had a sense of where he needed to go. The pain in Max's eyes, the way the dog had recognized him despite the years apart. It all felt like fate, a fate that had been waiting for him to return. The vet clinic wasn't far from the junkyard, just a few miles down the road. Jack had already called ahead, explaining the situation, and the receptionist, Rachel, was waiting for them when they arrived. As Jack stepped out of the truck, he noticed how quiet it was. It was early in the morning, and the parking lot was almost empty. Rachel, a kind-looking woman in her 30s, greeted him with a concerned smile. She had already seen the condition Max was in over the phone, and she seemed to understand just how urgent this was. "Let's get him inside," Rachel said softly, her voice gentle. She opened the door for Jack, who was carefully cradling Max in his arms. Max was still weak, but he had managed to stand up in the truck, his tail wagging slightly as if he recognized the change in environment. Jack followed Rachel through the front door, the clinic's sterile scent filling his nostrils. The walls were lined with framed photographs of pets and their owners, a reminder that this place wasn't just for dogs like Max. It was a place of care, of healing. Jack could only hope that they could help Max the way he had helped him all those years ago in the field. Once they were in the examination room, Rachel gently laid Max down on the table. Jack could barely bring himself to look at the dog's battered body. Max's fur was caked with dirt and dried blood, his eyes dull and exhausted, but there was something about him that made Jack's heart swell. The bond between them had never broken, even after all this time. "I'll just take a quick look at him, and then we'll get to work," Rachel said, pulling out a thermometer and checking Max's temperature. "Don't worry, we'll take care of him." Jack nodded, though his mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in Max's eyes when he had first seen him behind that fence. That recognition. It felt as if Max had been waiting for him all along, and Jack had finally arrived to finish what they had started. Rachel left the room briefly, and Jack stood there, watching Max carefully. The silence was deafening. He wanted to speak to Max, to tell him everything would be okay. But he didn't know if he could promise that. What he did know was that he wouldn't leave Max's side, no matter what. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and Dr. Mitchell, the veterinarian, stepped inside. He was an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, his face kind but worn. He had the look of someone who had seen a lot in his career, but there was a gentle quality to him that made Jack feel at ease. "How's he doing?" Jack asked, his voice tight. "It's too soon to tell," Dr. Mitchell replied, glancing at Max. "But I've seen worse cases. We'll do our best." Dr. Mitchell moved closer to Max and started checking his vitals, his fingers moving gently but purposefully over the dog's body. After a few minutes, he pulled out a small scanner and began scanning Max's neck, looking for a microchip. Jack watched, his heart beating faster. He wasn't sure what he was hoping for, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was an important step. A moment later, the scanner beeped. Dr. Mitchell looked at the screen with a furrowed brow. "Interesting," the doctor said, his voice lower now. "This is definitely a military-grade chip." Jack's stomach dropped. He had a feeling this was more than just an abandoned dog. It was Max, his partner, his friend. And now, the truth was starting to unfold. "What do you mean?" Jack asked, leaning in. Dr. Mitchell turned the scanner around so Jack could see. The screen displayed a string of numbers, along with a military designation and a clearance level that sent a chill down Jack's spine. The numbers flashed across the screen, and Jack's eyes widened. "This dog isn't just a pet," Dr. Mitchell said, shaking his head. "He's part of a special unit. It says here that he was transferred to a research division after the operation that supposedly killed him." Jack couldn't believe it. He had been told Max was dead. He had buried that pain and moved on. But the truth was that Max had been alive, used in some kind of covered operation. The military had kept this secret, not only from Jack, but from the world. They had let him believe his partner was gone. "That's impossible," Jack whispered, his voice cracking. "They told me Max was dead. They said he was killed in the blast." Dr. Mitchell glanced at Jack, his expression somber. "Well, according to the chip, he wasn't dead." "Not exactly. He was reassigned to a different unit. But whoever had him didn't report it. There were no adoption records, no official paperwork, just a line stating he was transferred to behavioral research." Jack's hands clenched into fists. The anger inside him bubbled up, but he swallowed it down. This wasn't the time for rage. It was time to get answers. "Who did this?" Jack muttered under his breath. Dr. Mitchell didn't answer, but Jack could see the same frustration in the vet's eyes. He didn't have the answers, but he could see how much this meant to Jack. "I'm going to find out," Jack said firmly, standing up. "I'm going to find out what happened to Max, and I'm going to make sure whoever did this pays for it." Dr. Mitchell didn't stop him. He simply nodded. "We'll do everything we can to help him. But I think you're right. This is just the beginning." Jack looked down at Max, whose eyes were still open, watching him closely. The bond they shared had never been broken. And now, together, they would face the truth, whatever it took. As Jack left the clinic with Max by his side, he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long, but nothing would stop him from finding the truth. Jack's mind raced as he drove away from the clinic, his thoughts tangled in a web of anger, disbelief, and determination. Max, his trusted partner, was still alive after everything he had been through. But the truth, that the military had lied to him, that they had used Max for something far darker than he could have imagined, was a bitter pill to swallow. He couldn't let this go. There was no way he was going to walk away from this, not after everything Max had endured. He knew he couldn't fight this battle alone. He needed help. He needed someone who understood the military system, someone who had seen the darker side of operations. And there was only one person Jack could turn to: Tom, an old friend and former army buddy. Tom had served with Jack in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. After they both left the military, Tom had become a private contractor, a man who could get things done in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Jack dialed Tom's number, his hands shaking slightly. He had no idea what he was going to say, but he knew he had to do something. "Tom, it's Jack," he said when the phone picked up. "Jack, damn, it's good to hear from you. What's up?" Tom's voice was familiar, steady, the kind of voice that reassured you in times of chaos. "You're not going to believe this," Jack said, his voice tight with emotion. "Max is alive. They lied to me. He's been used for some secret military project." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jack could almost hear Tom processing the information. "Wait a minute. Max is alive? After all these years?" Tom asked, his voice incredulous. That's insane. Where is he?" "He's with me now," Jack replied. "But there's more. They told me he died in action. But the truth is, they transferred him after the mission. They've kept him hidden, used him for research or something." Tom let out a long sigh. You know, I've heard whispers about things like this. Classified projects, experiments, and stuff that they don't want to get out. If Max is still alive, it's because they want him for something. Jack's stomach twisted. I need your help. We need to find out everything. Who's behind this? Who decided Max wasn't dead? All right, Jack, Tom said, his voice turning serious. I'm in. Meet me at the old safe house in 2 hours. I'll bring everything we need. The line went dead, and Jack's thoughts returned to Max, who was sitting quietly beside him in the truck. Max's presence was a comfort, a reminder of the bond they had shared all those years ago. But the anger inside Jack was growing stronger with every passing minute. He wouldn't let anyone get away with what they had done. True to his word, Tom was waiting for Jack at the safe house when he arrived. The old warehouse had been a temporary hideout during their time in the service, and it still smelled faintly of dust and oil. Tom was sitting at a table, a laptop open in front of him, his fingers typing furiously. You're not going to like what I found, Tom said, looking up from the screen as Jack entered the room. I'm used to bad news, Jack replied, his jaw clenched. Check this out. Tom turned the laptop around, revealing a series of encrypted military files. Jack scanned through the documents, his heart sinking as he read. They detailed a covert operation known as Project Sentinel, a program involving military animals that were subjected to behavioral testing and neurological research. The files also contained references to Operation Sandgate, the mission where Jack had lost his team and was told Max had died. This is sick, Jack muttered under his breath. They used these animals like tools. Max wasn't the only one. No, Tom said, shaking his head. There were others, all trained for combat, then discarded or experimented on, once they were no longer needed. Jack's anger boiled over. We need to expose this. We need to make them pay for what they've done. Tom nodded. I agree, but we need to be careful. This goes deep, Jack. The people behind this are connected, and they won't hesitate to bury this even further if they think you're coming after them. Jack slammed his fist onto the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. They've already buried the truth for too long. It's time we bring it into the light. I'm with you, Tom said firmly. But first, we need to gather everything we can. Get all the evidence we can find, and then we go public. Just then, Jack's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Who is it? Tom asked, noticing Jack's hesitation. Don't know, Jack replied, answering the call. Jack, it's Officer Grant. The voice on the other end said, I need to talk to you. Meet me in 2 hours. Bring Max. What's this about? Jack asked, his pulse quickening. You're in danger, Officer Grant replied, his voice low and urgent. And so is Max. Just trust me. I'll explain everything when we meet. Jack hung up, his heart racing. Tom, something's not right. Officer Grant just called. He says we're in danger. Damn it, Tom muttered. We need to move fast, Jack. Get all the evidence you can, and we'll meet Grant. But we need to be careful. This is bigger than we thought. Jack nodded, determination setting in. We'll do whatever it takes. Max deserves the truth, and I'm not going to stop until he gets it. The stakes were higher now. The truth wasn't just buried. It was being actively protected by forces Jack hadn't even begun to understand. But he was ready. For Max. For justice. And for whatever lay ahead. Jack felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he sat in the truck, Max by his side, both of them ready for the next step in their journey. The conversation with Officer Grant had shaken him. It was clear that their lives were in danger now, and the people who had covered up Max's survival were not going to let them expose the truth without a fight. But Jack wasn't going to back down. Not now, not after everything Max had been through, not after everything they had uncovered. We need to be careful, Max, Jack muttered, glancing at his loyal partner. Max's head rested on the seat, his amber eyes staring out of the window, as if he too understood the gravity of the situation. Jack could feel the bond between them stronger than ever. This wasn't just about righting a wrong anymore. It was about survival, justice, and ensuring that Max's story was told. They pulled into the quiet parking lot of the rundown motel that Officer Grant had directed them to. The place was as shabby as they came, with flickering neon lights and a front desk that hadn't seen a guest in weeks. Jack felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. There was something about this place that felt wrong. It was too quiet, too empty. "Stay close, Max," Jack whispered, reaching over to pat the dog's head. Max gave a soft whine, his body tensing as though he too sensed something was off. Jack stepped out of the truck, keeping his eyes peeled. The motel was surrounded by high walls, and there was no sign of life other than the occasional rustling of wind-blown trash. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they made their way to room 8, the door creaked open before Jack had a chance to knock. Officer Grant stood there, his eyes scanning the parking lot before ushering them inside. "Come in quickly," he urged, his voice low and cautious. "I don't have much time to explain, but I'll do my best." Jack entered the small room, Max following close behind. Officer Grant shut the door and immediately locked it, glancing nervously over his shoulder as though expecting someone to come through the door at any moment. "What's going on?" Jack asked, his voice urgent. "You said we're in danger. What do you know?" Grant took a deep breath, sitting down at the worn desk in the corner. His fingers tapped the edge nervously. "It's worse than we thought, Jack. The operation you were part of, Operation Sentinel, it wasn't just a covert military project. It was part of something much bigger, something that went beyond the battlefield. Max wasn't the only one. They've been conducting experiments on dogs, trying to create super soldiers, enhancing their abilities for more than just war." Jack's stomach churned. "You mean to tell me Max wasn't just a dog? He was part of some twisted science experiment?" Grant nodded grimly. "Yes, and it doesn't stop there. The people behind this have connections everywhere. Military, government, private contractors. They've been covering their tracks for years, but they didn't expect you to find out about Max. Now that you have, they're going to do everything they can to silence you." "Why are you helping me?" Jack asked, his voice filled with suspicion. "What's in it for you?" Grant hesitated. "Let's just say I have my reasons. I know the truth, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. But if we're going to expose them, we need more than just the evidence we have. We need to get the full story out. I've been working on a few contacts, independent journalists, whistleblower networks. But it's going to take all of us working together to make this stick." Jack's mind was racing. Everything had happened so fast. He had never expected things to get this complicated. "What's the plan?" Grant stood up, moving toward the window and peering outside cautiously. "We need to get to the source. The people behind Operation Sentinel are part of a larger syndicate. We have to follow the breadcrumbs to find them. But we also need to be prepared for anything. If they know we're onto them, they'll come after us, and they won't hesitate to use Max as leverage." "Max will be fine," Jack said firmly, glancing down at the dog, who was sitting quietly by his side. "He's been through worse." Grant looked at Jack with a knowing expression. "I hope so. But the real danger comes from those who are pulling the strings. They won't let their experiments be exposed, not without a fight." Just then, the door suddenly rattled. Jack's heart skipped a beat as a shadow passed under the door. Someone was outside. Grant rushed to the window, his face pale. "They found us," Grant whispered urgently. "They know we're here." "What do we do?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. "We don't have much time," Grant said, turning to Jack. "Grab the evidence. Max, too. We're leaving now." Jack moved quickly, gathering the hard drives and papers that contained the evidence they had collected. Max stood, his ears pricked, his body tense. Jack felt the dog's readiness, the same alertness they had shared in combat. Grant pulled out a small duffel bag and stuffed the evidence inside. We're heading to a safe location. From there, we'll upload everything we have to the journalists and make sure it gets out. But we need to move fast. The sound of footsteps echoed outside the door. Jack knew they didn't have much time. He glanced at Max, the dog's eyes locking onto his. It was a look that said it all. They were in this together, and they weren't backing down. "Let's go," Jack said, his voice resolute. "We finish this." They made their way to the back of the motel, moving swiftly and quietly. Jack's mind was set. This wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about bringing justice to those who had been wronged. And with Max by his side, Jack knew they were unstoppable. The mission wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning.